Good morning. Welcome to the Prado Museum in Madrid, Spain. We're here continuing our Wednesday series of short conversations with the collection, and today we're going to have a closer look at one of Spain's great 19th century painters, Mariano Fortuny. I'm Whitney Dennis with the American Friends of the Prado Museum. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping the museum with as many initiatives as we can, alongside our sister organization, the Fundación de Amigos del Museo del Prado. Mariano Fortuny is considered to be perhaps the greatest Spanish painter in between Goya and Picasso, even surpassing Sorolla, because Fortuny was enormously successful in his lifetime, even more so than Sorolla was. Early in his career, he was sent to Northern Africa and he was commissioned to paint a scene of the Battle of Tetuan. And he actually never finished this painting, and he had to return the money that he was paid to complete it. But it was in Northern Africa that he painted this scene of the Battle of Wadras. And here, this ended up being an incredibly important experience for his development as an artist, even though he never painted the scene of the Battle of Tetuan. It was here in Northern Africa that his eyes were open to the new colors and fabrics and light, colored shadows, wide open spaces, wide open landscapes that would so greatly impact his work for the rest of his career. So this sketch of the Battle of Wadras is from that trip. Now, his interest in Northern Africa would only increase as he traveled to Paris and he came into contact with artists like Delacroix. Delacroix was a leading figure in Orientalist painting, and he really maximized on the popularity of Orientalist themes in the art market at that time. Orientalism refers to the interest in representing visual elements that are connected to the cultures of present-day Northern Africa and the Middle East, which the Romantic artists in the 19th century found to be alluring and beautiful, fascinating, even sometimes dangerous and always exotic. And we can see this here in Fortuny's painting of the Moroccans, his interest in these cultures. And in Fortuny's last painting, we can see the interest in Japanese aesthetics. This is another interest of artists in the second half of the 19th century, after trade was open with Japan and there was an influx of Japanese culture in Europe. This painting of his children, set in a room of the painter's summer house, features Japanese decor. But even more than that, notice the emphasis on the horizontal format, with different flat planes of color that are finished off with decorative elements like this butterfly that really enhance the graphic quality of the painting and is a reference to Japanese design. And now we're going to have a look at another one of Fortuny's paintings, a really dreamy painting from 1866 called Fantasy on Faust. Now, before we even try to identify the figures that are painted here, we are immediately pulled in by this lyrical, poetic link that is established between painting and music. And on the ground we have an inscription that tells us exactly when and where this took place. This was inspired by one evening that Juan Bautista Pujol, one of the great composers and pianists of his time, who was also a friend of Fortuny, he performed his composition, The Grand Fantasy on Faust, in this intimate setting among his friends. And this took place in Francisco Sanz y Cabot's studio, a Catalan painter who was living in Madrid. Pujol's piece was based on the opera Faust by Charles Gounod that premiered just a few years earlier, and Pujol was famous for his lively, moving, intense performances, and we can see him here playing the piano with these score sheets lying on the ground, looking kind of disorganized, and we can imagine him kind of playing and then finishing a page and tossing it out of his way. People said that his intensity really made his audiences feel the emotions in the piece that he was playing, and we can notice the expressions, for example, on the spectators' faces. Look at their expressions, how they are completely lost in thought, completely absorbed by the music. And indeed, in Fortuny's interpretation of this evening, he really wanted to highlight how Pujol was able to conjure the story of Faust, how he was able to bring the story to life. And he's decided to do this by using this diagonal line. And this separates a world of imagination, a dreamy, imaginative world from the physical world, the real world. And in the upper dreamy half, we see four figures who are characters from Faust. Here, in rich, vivid colors, we see the figure of Mephistopheles. Mephistopheles is the form that the devil took to tempt Faust, who was an aging and disillusioned scholar, and he tempted him with the experience of full earthly knowledge and pleasure, which of course included love. And with the help of the devil's intervention, Marguerite fell in love with Faust. And here they are embracing in the back in a kiss. Mephistopheles is leading Martha, Marguerite's guardian, by the arm, distracting her while they're kissing further behind. And notice Mephistopheles' clothes. He's dressed so flamboyantly. This is just how Goethe described him in his play. He said he was like a young nobleman in a purple suit embroidered with gold, with a silk cape at his shoulder, a rooster feather in his hat, and a long, sharp sword at his side. And the figures in the distance are painted with such loose brush strokes, so light and quick that they kind of blend into the celestial background. And this light, airy brushwork really shows the influence of Tiepolo on Fortuny. And notice this element of the owl, too. Flying beneath the two central figures really adds to the feeling of fantasy, the unreal, the imaginative quality of this upper half of the painting as it passes right below where the others are walking. Owls are often associated with omens of death and connected with the devil, and its presence does make us feel somewhat uneasy. Fortuny was also a great admirer of Goya, and so the owl could be a reference to his famous capriccio, the sleep of reason produces monsters. Now, the painting is increasingly dark and shadowy as we move from the top left corner to the bottom right. And in the lower half of the painting, we have the real world. So we've gone really from the furthest mental image to the nearest physical reality. And here, the repetition of horizontal and vertical lines and the use of warm earth tones really ground us, and it adds to the feeling of solid, firm reality in this bottom half. The two young men who sit and listen so intently are also painters. These are Agapito Frances and Lorenzo Casanova. Both Frances and Casanova also created sketches on this same theme of Faust, so they were inspired by the same event. So we can think that this must have just been such a spectacular evening, such a moving performance to have left such a mark on all of those who attended. I hope that you've enjoyed having a closer look at some of Mariani Fortuny's work with me. You can find out more about this painting on the Prado's website and more about this great 19th century painter, Fortuny, as well. You can also find out a little bit more about the American Friends of the Prado Museum and the Fundación de Amigos del Museo del Prado. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next Wednesday.